the key to understanding the events of September 11, 2001 is to have a general understanding of the intelligence apparatuses like the Central Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, and the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and there are other intelligence agencies as well. But to get a better and general understanding of where we need to start, I would think that we need to start looking inwards instead of looking on just the day itself, just the day. Every historical event has a starting point, and with September 11th, take your pick. Usually I like to start with the Afghan-Soviet War, but you can even go further back if you want to have a more intricate and longer, broader understanding of how something like September 11th can even transpire. But to give a little bit of a more easier understanding for those who are just starting, I feel for you because there's a lot of disinformation regarding this particular event and any other. Maybe JFK would come to mind, but I think September 11th has a lot more of the fantastical scenarios than any other event. So the key, I think, to understanding 9/11 would be to understanding who are the primary players. In one area is you have the radical fundamentalists, you have the intelligence agencies, and the countries that are involved directly and indirectly. Let's talk about the radical fundamentalists, if you will. And one name that always pops up, and he was blamed just about 2 hours after the event had happened, that's Osama bin Laden. What do we know about Osama bin Laden other than what the media has told us? And for those who are just starting, for those who want to have a better understanding of 9/11, I would suggest looking into the backgrounds of the primary players. And the primary players are the radical fundamentalists, if you will. Osama bin Laden, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who's currently in Guantanamo Bay and is considered the primary orchestrator of the events of September 11th. Ayman al-Zawahiri, who is the number 2 de facto of Al-Qaeda and who is now currently the emir due to bin Laden's death that supposedly happened in 2011 in Pakistan. And of course, the pilots that piloted the 4 planes that we were told, Ziad Jarrah for Flight 93, Mohammed Atta for Flight 11, American Airlines Flight 11, Marwan al-Shehi for for United Airlines Flight 175, and Hani Hanjour, who supposedly piloted American Airlines Flight 77. Start with the backgrounds of these 4 people. You have the muscle hijackers, but take one at a time and do a background search, a layman search regarding these people. And in regards to obtaining information regarding these people, use caution. And this is one area that is quite troubling for those who are not understanding of how proper and responsible research is conducted. My advice to you would be to treat everyone as a liar, including myself, and then read the information that is at your disposal through internet search and conduct your research in a area in a sense of like treating it as if everything that has been told is a lie. And if you find a reputable source of information that is consistent, that is factually based through your own investigation of how this information was obtained, you keep that person close to you. This is a reputable source of information, whether it comes from an agency or it comes from an independent researcher or an author, and you find this information credible and it's factual, and you put that to the side and you write his name down through a notebook or through a notepad, whatever means that you you keep information stored, or even on a hard drive, and you go back to that person if he continues to conduct himself in a responsible manner. And it's going to be hard to do, because this is the one area where you're going to invest much of your time in, is to find out if the information is reputable and factual through vigorous investigating inquiries of your own. This is going to be the most time consuming in regards to research. So intelligence agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, NSA, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, these are the three primary agencies involved with the United States. And then you have the Israeli Mossad, the Saudi General Intelligence Directorate, the GID, I like to call for short. The oldest intelligence apparatus, which is the Pakistan Inter-Services Agency, the ISI. All these agencies had a direct and indirect affiliation with the events of September 11th. And then you have other covert, smaller black ops agencies that are involved in infiltrating groups. We'll get to that in a minute. Find out how these intelligence agencies operated, how they are formed, how they're conducting human historical events such as September 11th, how they're involved. Get a general understanding of how they operate. That's very important in regards to especially September 11th. The countries are involved. United States, obviously. Saudi Arabia, which is where supposedly 16 of the 19 hijackers are from. Israel, which had three major spy rings inside the United States. One that could be primarily involved, but we don't have enough information, direct information, showing that they were complicit, which I mean involved in the hijacking of the planes themselves. But they certainly have foreknowledge of the event, and they were there to monitor these operatives. Other countries that have been indirectly involved, like Pakistan, Egypt, which may have a more direct involvement, Morocco, Syria, indirect involvement. Find out how these countries have been affected, or how they have even benefited from the events of September 11th. So those three areas I would suggest have, to start with, just get a general understanding of how they operate and how they were involved with 9/11, how they benefited from the attacks. Now, going back to the intelligence apparatuses, how large organizations infiltrate these radical fundamentalist groups, the intelligence community, the special ops, like the CIA, or the Israeli Mr. Arvim, which is hardly ever spoken about, which is a very small and very covert group of Israelis that infiltrate Arab neighborhoods by learning the language, learning the culture, and to also assimilate within these communities. Now, sometimes these operations could last months, even years. So these are dedicated operatives within this special covert group called the Mr. Arvim. The Pakistan ISI, which is a very old and very covert, manipulative group that oftentimes is seen as a friend and an enemy, because meanwhile they're trying to eliminate religious fundamentalism, but in the back door they're selling them arms and giving them covert funding to continue the battle. This way, it's how the CIA operates as well in this area regarding religious fundamentalism. And a great example of that is what we're seeing with the Islamic State in Syria and Libya. They're gathering intelligence, trying to to gain where these operatives are conducting the operations and giving that intelligence to, like, this Joint Special Operations Command or the Army and the Marines. And meanwhile, out the back door, they're giving them weapons and funding so that the war could continue. And meanwhile, these agencies could continue getting these bloated annual funding through Congress. I mean, they just can't come right out and say, hey, we need such and such amount of money so that we can continue fighting the Mujahideen or Al Qaeda or the Islamic State. Meanwhile, we're funding them. The direct black operation funding usually comes from the drug trade, and that's what the CIA specializes in. And it's one of the major reasons why we continue to be involved in Afghanistan, because that's where the Helmand province is, and in the Helmand province is where the largest opium fields are in the world, even larger than the Golden Triangle. And one of the probably the most valuable sources of, I'd say, weapons, it's not covertly a weapon, but it's intelligence. Intelligence is the primary form of information, primary form of how to infiltrate these groups and how to manipulate operations before they even form. That's why intelligence is considered the primary, the most valuable source, the most valuable resource in the world, more so than weapons or money or drugs. It's intelligence, collecting, gathering intelligence. Now, there are 4 definitions of intelligence, and if we're going by the Webster's Unabridged, intelligence is the following: the obtaining or dispensing of information, particularly secret information. Also, the persons engaged in obtaining information, i.e. the Secret Service. Then you have the Dictionary of United States Military Terms of Joint Usage. Quote, intelligence, the product resulting from the collection, evaluation, analysis, integration, and interpretation of all available information which concerns one or more aspects of foreign nations or of areas of operation which is immediately or potentially significant to planning. To the CIA Training Handbook, intelligence is the following. Quote, the product resulting from the collection, evaluation, collation, interpretation, and analysis of all available information concerning the intentions, capabilities, and objectives of other countries which are significant to a government's development and execution of plans, policies, decisions, and courses of action. End quote. You also have R.A. Random's Studies of Intelligence, which is in the Studies of Intelligence, Volume 2. Quote, intelligence is the official, secret collection and processing of information on foreign countries to aid in formulating and implementing foreign policy and the conduct of covert activities abroad to facilitate the implementation of foreign policy, end quote. So as you can see, there are minute disagreements within what involves intelligence, and there are two primary sources of intelligence, and one is human intelligence, or in short, HUMINT, H-U-M-I-N-T. Human intelligence is covert intelligence, or intelligence gathered by means of interpersonal contact. This is in regards to following a person, monitoring an organization or a person or individuals, and collecting the data regarding your monitoring of these individuals or organizations, such as what this person, who they're meeting, what their background is regarding to their goals or agendas regarding agencies or organizations, what they're primarily about. Is this person sharing information with another person who's like-minded, or maybe sharing data with a foreign intelligence unit or individual? So that would be human intelligence. The other form of intelligence is signals intelligence, or SIGINT, S-I-G-I-N-T for short. and that is intelligence gathered by interception of signals, whether communication between people or from electronic signals such as computers or cell phones. This is primarily what's happening with the NSA, involving all around the world. There are major signal intelligence agencies. The NSA is not the biggest. In fact, the biggest is the CGBC. I'm sure I'm pretty getting that wrong. That's the British intelligence agency. And if I were to cheat and Google the name of that intelligence agency, I will give you my answer, and that is the I think it's called the Well, my Wi-Fi is pretty slow, so we'll just we'll skip it for now. And you also have Canadian intelligence, and you also have Australian intelligence, and they're all considered as one in terms of sharing data information, and their cooperative agreement organization is called Five Eyes Intelligence. These agencies tend to share information within each other. Now, years ago, you would need a warrant to gather information about a specific individual that resides in your country, but after the events of September 11th, that is no longer the case. In fact, Bush signed into the Patriot Act and the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, many other different regulations that were in terms of like collecting information more free-ranging, and they're not constricted to regulation and laws regarding the country in which they are monitoring. In regards to the United Kingdom, the name of the intelligence apparatus is the GCHQ, and that's the Government Communication Headquarters. They're considered the largest intelligence agency in the world, and the other agencies, like, of course, the National Security Agency, the Australian Secret Intelligence Service, the Canadian Forces Intelligence Command, and the Canadian Secret Security Establishment, and New Zealand, such as the New Zealand Security Intelligence Services. These are all part of the Five Eyes. And this is important to understanding because they collect information on behalf of, in regards to metadata. Metadata is one person's emails, their phone calls, anything that is involving that specific individual. So to get a better understanding of how these intelligence agencies work and how the intelligence agencies collect information, I would suggest getting a better understanding of how these agencies operate. And something like the event of September 11th, a large-scale operation, if you will, are often known before they begin by these intelligence agencies. In fact, that's how they seemingly allow these operations to transpire, or they can indulge themselves in getting maybe a secret inside man, if you will, in regards to an organization, a large-scale organization like Al-Qaeda. And they can manipulate the operations before they even begin, or maybe even allowing it to happen without interference from outside infiltrators, or having insiders giving the intelligence community sensitive intelligence data that they need to ensure operations are not compromised from the outside, like the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That's exactly what happened with September 11th. And this is one area, again, unfortunately, is not spoken about, and that's the Central Intelligence Agency, who are monitoring at least two of the hijackers, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hamzi, as far back as 1998. With the NSA, it could be as far back as 1996, because that's how they got the number to the Yemen hub, the Al-Qaeda hub, which is owned by Ahmed al-Hada, who's an Afghan an Afghan associate to Osama bin Laden. And this Ahmed al-Hada home, the Yemen hub, is where all high-profile al-Qaeda operatives used to call, including bin Laden, Zawahiri, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed Atef, who was the military commander-in-chief to al-Qaeda. So you have all these notable individuals calling this hub, and meanwhile the Central Intelligence Agency, who tapped the phone in '98, and the NSA, who may have had a line as going back as far back as 1996. You don't think that these agencies were listening to coded transmissions, which were easy to break, regarding numerous operations like the embassy bombing or the 2000 attack on the Cole, September 11th. The CIA even had human intelligence regarding who was coming in and outside the home in regards to just bugging inside the house. The NSA were the only agency that had a direct line inside the number, and they could listen to all incoming and outgoing calls. The CIA can only listen to the outgoing calls. They didn't have a tap on the phone itself like the NSA did, so they were arguing with the NSA to share the information, and the NSA was very strict in regards to sharing information, so they didn't really share the information with Alex Station. That was the virtual station where the CIA was monitoring bin Laden and al-Qaeda. And meanwhile, the FBI, who had 3 agents inside the Alex Station, they couldn't get information shared from the CIA to them. So the CIA was holding information to the FBI, and the NSA was not sharing information with the CIA or the FBI. So you have interagency fighting, but there's more to it than that. And so get a better understanding of how Alex Station worked and what is the Ahmed al-Hada Yemen hub. These are 2 areas I would stress enough for you to get a better understanding of, because this is where how 9/11 transpired and where that information came from, and who is withholding information, what type of information was shared, and what type of information that we, the public, can know. This is so, I cannot stress how important this is. This is very important. So get a better understanding of Alex Station and the Ahmed al-Hada Yemen hub. Now, who benefits from 9/11? This is pretty easy, right? The general understanding is that the United States, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the Pentagon, and then you have countries that may have had an indirect involvement that sort of benefited, but they didn't in the long run. So let's talk about the long run, who benefits. And I think I said the 3 primary players. That's the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. And these are the unholy trinity, as I would say. With the United States, it's the Pentagon. Military expansionism. You have unlimited funding in regards to their annual budget, which keeps getting bigger and bigger, and you have the social sectors like Social Security, the healthcare industry, education, which are being depleted almost every year in regards to keeping up with the grossly over-budgeted Pentagon. Certain agencies like the State Department, of course the intelligence apparatus like the NSA, the FBI, who've had their annual funding almost given a blank check. The NSA was given basically a blank check by George Bush immediately after the events of September 11th. Also the private sector, the security fields regarding like the TSA, which was formed in October. Other security agencies I won't even get into, like the private fields such as Halliburton, Securicom, Raytheon, all these big name security and military corporations that got basically hundreds of millions, and especially even during the 2 wars that followed September 11th, Iraq and Afghanistan, where these military military corporations got even in the billions. Halliburton being one, and Dick Cheney, who was a CEO of Halliburton. Saudi Arabia, the Sunni Shia divide, getting rid of all the um, Shia Arab national countries like Libya, Syria, and of course Iran, which is the looming war, the big war. Saudi Arabia, which ironically had 16 of the 19 hijackers, which were derived from, and the ideology that was basically used, which was the Wahhabi ideology, which is what Muhammad Atta and all these Osama bin Laden and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed claimed to have been behind. But that's where the Wahhabi ideology came from, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia gets rid of all their preconceived enemies because the United States goes into these wars, these countries that Wesley Clark once asserted on Democracy Now!, the 7 countries, like Syria, Libya, Iraq, the Sudan, which we didn't go into, Syria, which was a failed operation only because of the Turks and Russian military, which was behind in eliminating the Islamic State and not the United States, because they were actually covertly funding the Islamic State. That was primarily from the CIA itself. Israel, basically the Arab countries destabilized, many of them. Expansionism of its own borders incrementally, so you won't even notice. And of course the Palestinian plight, many people will just look at the Palestinians and say, well, the heck with them, they're involved with Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, and meanwhile the Palestinians themselves, the civilians, don't want anything to do with Hamas or the radical fundamentalist groups, which are basically just proxy armies of Saudi Arabia, and they're given leeway by Israel. In fact, when Hamas actually throws a homemade rocket into an area like Haifa in Israel, Israel can use that excuse and overexert their military and just basically saturate a neighborhood with white phosphorus, or they could just go into the area and just douse them with hundreds of thousands of bullets and just saturate the area with military armaments, so that basically these groups are allowed to exist. Israel itself could destroy Hamas easily. Not so much Hezbollah, because in 2006 they were defeated by Hezbollah. Israel itself, their military, isn't very good at fighting against a formidable military that they consider an enemy. So that's why they always use the United States as the big brother, if you will. And this is not anti-Semitic at all to criticize the right-wing Likud party that is right now dominant in Israeli government. But I notice that there are people who are ardent defenders of Israel, and they don't have to primarily be Israeli. They could be from the United States. In fact, the biggest Zionists in the world are evangelical, Christian evangelicals, more so than Israeli Zionists. In fact, I think the latest statistic involving evangelical Zionism is the number is 33 million, and that's just approximately. We won't know the true definition, but let's just say we just go with that number. That is a huge percentage, considering that there's only 330 million people inside the United States. If we just take that number, for example, 33 million, that's more than the whole entire state of Israel. So, like tenfold almost. So you have that. In fact, that's a great amount of people that will say that if you criticize the state of Israel, you're an anti-Semite and you hate the United States. That's necessarily the case. I've never been anti-Semitic, and I do have legitimate grievances when it comes to the United States in general. And it's not anti-American at all to point out the numerous egregious acts of the United States military, the State Department, the Pentagon, uses in our name in regards to these wars abroad. I didn't ask the United States to go into a war with Iraq twice, or to a war with Afghanistan, which is the longest war in human history, and it is a useless war. And we've seen way too many people die. In fact, over 1.1 million Iraqis are dead at this juncture. And meanwhile, 3,000 people died on September 11th. But you'll get defenders of these wars to say, well, that's what you get for messing with us, so to speak. I think that's a horrible, gross conduct of one's moral injuncture to proclaim that if you mess with us, we're going to kill, 1 million people. Now it's much more than that. I mean, but look at the excuses they're using to try to justify a war with Iran. If Israel really is afraid of Iran, well, they shouldn't be, because Iran's not a threat to anyone at all. Israel has, I think at this point, no one knows the amount of nuclear armaments that they have. And let's just say that we dismiss that. They have the United States behind them in the coalition. France, Germany, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, and all these big major powers, military of their own, that all these Arab countries would pose absolutely zero threat to Israel or to the United States. In fact, it would be self-suicide if they did. And Iran knows that. I mean, yeah, does Iran have these problems that could pose as a internal threat of their own, like the mullahs of Iran themselves? We can easily get rid of these, almost like this trivial problem. I consider it a trivial problem easily through rational political dialogue and not through force of our military, because it will just hurt us as the American citizenry in the end, in the longer run. And didn't that happen after the Iraq War? We had the 2008 recession, which destroyed the housing market, especially in areas like Nevada, New Mexico, California. Look at the disparity of rich and poor that we see today. So what I'm trying to understand and trying to reiterate to you is to have a better understanding of 9/11, is to have a general understanding of the instances and the areas in which I just implied in this video. And if you're going to look at 9/11 through these rose-colored glasses of, like, saying, following the works of, like, Loose Change or Christopher Bolin, Alex Jones, the Godfather of Conspiracy, Jim Fetzer, Rebecca Roth, etc., you will know next to nothing about 9/11. In fact, you'll know just a tiny percentage. And 9/11 isn't as easy as these people make it out to be. I wish it was. I would have spent the last 13 years reading material in regards to these areas I outlined in this video. And for future videos, I'm going to elaborate a little bit further regarding these points, and to be helpful as much as possible to the person who is just beginning to indulge themselves into this area. Now, also too, I'll speak more to the more invested individuals, and that's a small group of people that I met through internet forums like Facebook and Twitter. And my channel is basically a learning channel. As you'll see, there's videos of the Joint House Inquiry. In fact, my next folder will be from the 9/11 Commission, and that's another two areas I'd like for people to get an understanding of. In fact, I broke down the Joint Inquiry into smaller, manageable sections, 5 minutes, 10 minutes each, because these videos are 3 hours long, and it's hard to sit through 3 hours, believe me. So I managed to break down all the Joint House Inquiry sessions into smaller videos of 10 minutes 13 minutes each. It's much more manageable. And I'll do that with the 9/11 Commission. I'll upload that this week, like 5 to 10 videos at a time until it's completed. But have an understanding of the 9/11 Commission. Have an understanding of the Joint House Inquiry. They didn't tell the truth, but this is where you can catch, like, George Tenet, who was the director of the CIA, perjure himself. Condoleezza Rice from the State Department perjure herself. I'm not going to tell you where, when. Just look for yourself, and you'll see. You'll have an understanding of what information was shared with the 9/11 Commission and the Joint House Inquiry, and also you'll know what information wasn't brought up or was shared or was covered up by the Commission or by the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the State Department, NORAD, which basically gave a false timeline to the Joint House Inquiry and the 9/11 Commission. In fact, Thomas Kean, Richard Benveniste, who was a member, Thomas Kean, who was a co-chair, actually basically said they lied to us. Were they ever held accountable? No, nobody was for 9/11. So, in conclusion to this video, I reiterate, to have a better understanding of 9/11 is to have a general understanding. You have to be an expert. I'm not an expert. I'm a student of these affairs. I'm just a little bit more aware than the common man regarding these areas. But so can you. You don't have to indulge 8 hours a day, 7 hours a day. Just give yourself an hour a day, an hour and a half of reading material. Read more. Watch less video. Indulge yourself in reading files and documents and reading books. It's much more educational than just watching a 2-hour video regarding the individuals I mentioned before, and they'll just give you a one-sided view of 9/11. And it's a dead-end view. It's a dead-end view. So, in conclusion, I would suggest to look at 9/11 in the respect that it's given, and it's not given, by the general public and from these intelligence agencies and organizations from the United States and abroad, and to give it its respect and its due and its investment in regards to obtaining information, and to be as completely unprejudiced, unbiased, if you can, in indulging this information, because that's the only way you're ever going to get a better understanding of the events of September 11, 2001.